3:15 a.m. The last of the coffee is gone. The caffeine is making me jittery. Funny, alone in the dark with one's thoughts like this, it can be very disconcerting. Every sound, every shift of the countless overlapping shadows, and my muscles leap with adrenaline. I still don't know what I'm expecting to find, but I will podcast till sunrise.
Welcome back to another episode of Spawnography Hellspawn. I'm your co-host Pierce Lyden. Pronouns they them. Here with, as always,
George Morrison, pronouns they them or she her.
Oh boy, it's been a while, George. We haven't recorded in a minute. But how are you?
Yeah, I fell off my step stool earlier and I felt very old, so not great. But my back is I'm just icing it now, and I think it'll be okay.
I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I think so.
And listen, if you're not fine, just use a little bit of the power meter, heal it right up.
I'll have to do that. I'll just have to dip into the power meter. Or, perhaps the native powers of my symbiotic parasite will kick in and protect the host as they often do. How about you, Pierce? How's your whole scam going?
Pretty good. I got my roster for the next season of roller hockey, so I have mostly the same kids and a few newbies. So
Nice.
That'll be interesting. And besides that, I am gonna maybe DM my first game of Dungeons and Dragons at some point in the next couple months. So I've been reading the Dungeon Master Guide, which
the Dungeon Master's Guide.
which is something. Vanessa and I play Mouse Guard tabletop with some of our friends.
I know that tabletop game.
It's fun to hang out with my friends. The playing of it is a little frustrating. I don't love the dice rolling aspect of the cards for fighting. There's a lot going on that, in fairness, I did not read the player's manual, so I just went in blind. And so there have been weeks where I'm like, this is stupid, and I'm like, well, if I knew what was happening because I'd done my homework, then I wouldn't think it was stupid. So I should shut up. But I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is a little bit and run a campaign of normal-ish D&D. We're doing
nice,
basing it off Candlekeep Mysteries, which is
cool.
One of the modules or whatever.
Hell yeah. Gotta start somewhere. I've been doing a little D&D campaign with a couple of my friends off and on for a little while now. It's, it's one of those things where you're in your 40s. It's hard to get everybody together consistently, and that's for just about anything, be it D&D or a band or whatever you want. So, I've been working on some music with my roommate. It's nice to have that going on, some new stuff. I think I talked to you about it a little bit. We got that going. And just trying to hang in there and fight the good fight. The big news this week in our world, sort of, is that McFarlane Toys has lost the license to do DC action figures.
Right. Yeah, as we're recording this, Toy Fairs just ended as well.
Right.
So
they announced that Dr. Doom helmet. I'll be wearing that way too much.
Super cool. Also, a bunch of images from Avengers Doomsday leaked.
Yeah, I saw that with
concept
Dupe.
art.
With Dupe.
I saw, I'm all right. I'm mad about something. I saw some TikToker who's new Marvel stuff just got leaked, blah blah blah, and the guy mentioned Dupe and was yeah, then there's this other weird guy. His name's Dupe, but whatever. And I was first of all, the dupe disrespect. Second of all, I'm sorry, and I'm
The
being
dupes
elite.
respect.
I'm gonna be an elitist nerd now. Don't you can't just be an MCU fan that has that makes content about only the MCU and be like, oh yeah, that thing that they're now adding, I just don't care about. Like dupe is not a big deal, but it's a little bit of a big deal.
It's weird. I'm going to have to write about that at my job, I'm sure. Which, hell yeah, dupe. The funny thing, years and years ago, I was invited to be on a podcast, and I was on a few episodes of it years before this one about the MCU. And I thought we were going to be talking about MCU movies. And I thought, since I'm a comic book person mostly, and like my job is comic book expert basically, that I'd be talking about like the comic book side of the MCU. And like they were like, nope, we're just going to exclusively be reviewing episodes of Agent Carter. And we won't be talking about any of the connections to Marvel Comics, because we're going to have a side episode that comes out every week from another person that discusses only that. And I was just like, I
What are we
lasted like
doing?
2 or 3 episodes, I think, maybe. And I mean, I have nothing bad to say about the people that ran the show. They ran a whole like podcast network at the time, and the show itself was fine. It just, in that regard, I wasn't expecting to just be reviewing a very kind of shitty ABC TV show.
Yeah, I am always there. I feel like there are definitely two types of MCU fans, and they are ones that there are some that see a thing in a movie and then want to know everything about that thing. And then
Right.
there are some who, and this is a little bit the fault of the MCU, because the MCU does tend to throw a lot of things out there and then just never do anything with them. They're like, if it's not going to be followed up on, I'm not even going to put the energy in to try to find out what that thing is.
Right. Like,
Um,
are we really going to see Hercules in another movie?
are we really going to see? Are we really going to see Star Fox again?
Yeah.
I mean, and listen, Star Fox is one that you shouldn't want to find out more about.
Yeah,
Red
that's
flag if you
true.
do.
Kind of a bad. Yeah.
But I don't know, Pip the Troll and
Yeah.
Dupe and I don't know,
Dupe.
Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck. Yeah, have
Anyway,
they ever done Howard the Dupe, just Dupe with a beak? That feels like that's been a
that feels like a Chip
variant
Zdarsky
cover or
comic
something.
already.
Yeah,
They should do
100%.
Dupe Month. Dupe Month. Everything's dupes.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't wait. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time to be an MCU fan. Captain America, we talked about it in the last episode. As we record this, we're like 48 hours away from the premiere of Daredevil,
Yep.
which I have heard is quite good. Um, I'm excited for that. I saw a clip. Did you see the clip they showed of Daredevil fighting fucking Bullseye in a
No.
stairwell?
No, I
Holy
didn't.
shit, man.
I didn't, because I don't even remember what happened in season 2 of that show
I don't care
that
about
came
any
out
of
8
that.
years ago.
I just like that they're doing like they're doing a new thing. They're doing the Mayor Fisk thing, which I like. That fight scene was crazy. Daredevil had like 8 knives sticking out of him. It was
That's cool.
wild. And then like Bullseye makes it to the roof and Daredevil just springs up above, like behind him. And I was like, oh, he's about to throw his ass off of that roof. I can't wait to see it. That's
They should
that's
let Daredevil say
yeah.
fuck.
I hope they let Daredevil fuck. Look,
We already know.
actually,
Well, actually, canonically, of all of the MCU characters, Daredevil has he and She-Hulk have
yeah, that's fair. I was about to say only She-Hulk can survive Matt Murdock. Like she's the only one tough enough. I wrote
and vice versa.
the last day I worked on Friday. I wrote I went to the coffee shop and I usually get a 20-ounce coffee to start my day, and they were out of 20-ounce cups, so they gave me 24 ounces. So by the end of the day, I had written 2,000 words about the history of Daredevil, which is way too much, but I still published it. My coworkers were all like, "What the fuck, dude?" And I just realized as I was writing it, I didn't manage to even fit in all of this stuff, because you just can't tell 60 years of a character's history in a presentable format without it being like unpublishable.
I can do Daredevil real quick. Okay, listen.
Yeah.
Daredevil. Dad was a boxer, throws a fight, gets killed. Matt Murdock goes blind, gives him superpowers, becomes a ninja sometimes. Done.
Yeah, but then I also have to talk about like the actual details of stuff. Anyway, I realized that pretty much every woman that Matt Murdock has been with has died at
Dies.
least once.
Yeah. It's not great.
Basically all of them. It's not good. But you know, there's always the next one.
Well, MCU aside, I am excited for Daredevil. I will watch the new Daredevil, but MCU aside, we do have 2 issues of Spawn to get into. Well, technically 1 issue of Spawn and 1 issue of Curse of the Spawn. The reason that we're doing this, listeners, is because
Nothing
there's
fucking
some.
matters anymore.
Well,
And we can
that,
do whatever we want.
but also, 87 is like a weird kind of one shot that doesn't really fit in with anything else. Then
Yeah.
we realize that we're not super great at covering more than 2 issues at a time. And there's a Curse of the Spawn arc that is 3 issues. So we're just going to throw the first issue in here, and we'll do the next 2 next episode. And then the reason we're including them we'll get into, but it leads into the Sam and Twitch series. We are not planning to cover the Sam and Twitch series, but if you want it, we'll do it.
We'll figure out a way. Yeah, I mean, this is just an experiment, really. Like, I think pretty much every time we've touched on Curse of the Spawn, we've experimented with it a little bit, because it's kind of weird to stick in a whole second title that goes alongside and in and weaves in and out of the Spawn title. And also we like to try and stick mostly to mainline Spawn, because there's only so much life to live.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying something a little different here. I think it'll be fun. We're going to do 1 Spawn, 1 Curse of the Spawn. If you like it, don't like it, let us know. You know, just don't be an asshole about it. That's all we ask.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this will be fun. 87, like Pierce said, feels... We'll get into it. We'll just get into it, you know?
Yeah. So I'm going to hit you with those credits. This is Spawn.
Do it.
Number 87, Todd McFarlane and Image Comics present Folklore. Plot, Brian Holguin and Todd McFarlane. Story, Brian Holguin. Penciler, Greg Capullo. Inker, Danny Miki. Copy editor and lettering by Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Dan Kemp, Brian Haberlin, and Dave Kemp. Cover art by Greg Capullo and Danny Miki. Dedicated to Kenny Korick. I could find nothing about this person on the internet, so they are probably a friend of somebody. There was only an obituary for like someone in their like 60s that died in like 2009. And I have no idea if that person, there's no other real details, so no idea. Anyway, we're going to open this with the ghostly green glow of a computer screen being used as the kind of word balloons or the narration balloons here. And it says, New York City is a city built on ghosts. Close your eyes and you can hear them. Look quickly enough and you may see them. And if that doesn't tip you off.
Yeah, it's very much like a James Elmore sort of like very hard boiled, like, this is where the people were fucked to death. And this is where they died of construction sites. And this is where the people, like, just all these like dark stories of death. And the page is fine. It's kind of showing the aftermath of, or sorry, no, it is that green glow of the computer. What we're talking about here is kind of all the aftermath of what happened in Rat City, and the person who's trying to piece together everything he can about Spawn, which is returning champion Ethan Crone,
who we just haven't seen for a couple of issues, which is fine. And we're sort of getting a bit of the close to his story in this issue. And I guess this issue is kind of like I don't know, this guy was there and then we ignored him for a few issues. So let's just kind of wrap this up.
It's sort of the denouement of what just happened, where Spawn, to recap a little bit, Spawn quit. He decided, I quit. And he kind of torched the entire, all of Rat City was kind of like scorched.
Yeah.
and he forced all of the night people out of his territory, and he's basically just decided he doesn't want any part of heaven or hell or any of it.
Yeah.
And Neil Gaiman, I'm sorry, Ethan Crone. Uh, we'll talk. You know what? Right at the top, let's go ahead and address that because we've discussed it a couple times. Ethan Crone really kind of feels like the caricatured version of Neil Gaiman,
Yeah.
and
It's definitely
especially
highfalutin writer guy.
considering some of the things we know now about Neil Gaiman and who he is and what he does, the character here feels very pointed and very much like someone who had heard the backroom chatter, perhaps, or maybe just got lucky in how they describe an arrogant piece of shit. And we'll just go ahead and say, if you don't know about the Neil Gaiman Todd McFarlane feud, the TLDR is that Neil Gaiman created some characters that were used in Spawn without a contract, and Todd McFarlane didn't necessarily purposely try to fuck him over, but it led to a lawsuit over the rights and the money from the toys. We've covered it a lot. And if you don't know about Neil Gaiman and the allegations, you know, he's just a bad person. He did a lot of bad, violent things to women, and it sucks, and he sucks, and fuck him. So that's all there is to it. And that's as much of it as I want to get into here, but I do want to point out how much Ethan Crone does come off as like Neil Gaiman, like a punitive Neil Gaiman caricature.
To that point, we're gonna sort of dive deeper into what Ethan Crone's really getting up to. We find out that 6 weeks ago is when that fire happened that like destroys Rat City.
Yeah, it's been
So
6 weeks since the end of the last
yeah,
issue.
a little bit of time has passed, and Ethan Crone's on deadline, and his publisher is wanting the book that he's been promising, but he still doesn't have it. And
He's become
he
obsessed with finding Spawn.
Yeah. And that's going to lead to sort of the structure of this issue, which is a series of interviews with different people in and around Rat City, around the Bowery. Um, I think it is okay. I think it works for what it is. It's unfortunately like when you're trying to like it's not very comic booky. It is like a movie where it's just kind of subtitles and images.
Right. It's structured in a way that you don't normally see. So, okay. Each page is 6 panels of the interview subject, basically depicting their face and their, what they look like as the interview is progressing, like how they're talking. And underneath each panel is just a block of text, like showing the contents of the interview, what they're saying.
Right.
Now, it's kind of
That
fine. It kind of harkens to some things that say like Grant Morrison has done, and some of their like there was that Batman the Clown at Midnight that was just
mhm.
text and pictures. It almost feels a little bit like Heroes in Crisis in a way, that
Mm.
kind of confessional look. So it's a little prescient, but it also is kind of fucking boring as like a comic book if you're not like, oh, huh.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing is it's just kind of boring. It's also the images, the panels are pretty small, and that's not to say that Capullo's work here is bad. It's not, but it doesn't really take advantage of the space. So you can draw it a little bit faster when
Yeah,
most of the page is empty space
and I
or
mean,
lettering.
it's a mixed bag of challenges because you have to craft 6 panels of the same face or faces over and over again and make those talking heads interesting enough as a page to work. And I think that Greg Capullo succeeds at that
Yeah,
while also limiting himself to this structure. And it does feel a little bit like the structure was born out of like, let's hit that deadline
yeah,
without it looking like shit. Let's
yeah.
try something. And, I don't hate it, but if I was, say, 13, this would be the issue that I'd be writing in about in a couple weeks, being like, don't do that stupid crap again, Todd. Like
And
Mr.
also,
McFarlane,
Kiss
you know?
sucks.
And also
Uh,
Kiss sucks. Kiss
so
sucks.
so
That's true.
the first interviews with Stiv and Lisa,
Kind
and
of
they
two
are
punks.
a couple of punks, and they just kind of they're just like, yeah, I heard of Spawn, and I heard of him from the old guys in the alley. They're kind of depressing, and I heard that he's a black guy, and they did something to him, gave him superpowers, and never talked to him. Kind of kept my distance. Um,
Then they
they
asked for
could,
money.
and then they asked for
Yeah.
money. Next up is Jaka.
Well, hold on. Let's talk about this for a second.
Sure.
Don't speed through everything, Pierce. There are things to say about this.
All right, all right. You got to give Stiv and Lisa their flowers.
Yes. First off, Stiv Baders, perhaps.
Yeah.
Um, but okay. I want to say in this first panel, he says, "I used to scam down near the alleyways. Dudes around there were pretty cool." The funny thing is, I have to assume that that originally said I used to hustle down near the alleyways, but they changed it because in punk speak, that means something different from scam,
True.
which is, you know, sex work. Um, and yeah, they say that they heard Spawn was a guy from the army who had experiments done to him. Kind of interesting. It flashes back to that one story where they were experimenting on all of the necroplasm.
Yeah, yeah. The curse story.
Yes, and they're just like, well, we got big plans. They call him an alien. Yeah, that's it. And then we meet Jaka. Go on about Jaka, Pierce. You want to talk about Jaka so bad? Let's talk about Jaka.
So Jaka is a musician who's, I guess, hanging out nearby, and
He's like a reggae musician.
yeah, this is definitely a characterization. I'd say some choices were made in the way that Jaka speaks, and I'm not the person to say whether or not it's insensitive, but it doesn't feel great.
I have the same Jaka. Okay, to be clear, this character is black and is depicted as speaking in a kind of patois. It's not as offensive as you might expect from some 90s comics. It's certainly not like a Gambit level
True.
like oh hey there monsieur. Like it's not that level of like incomprehensible. It feels like an attempt at authenticity. Whether that attempt succeeds or not, like you said, is kind of an uncomfortable question to answer.
Yeah, and basically, Jaka doesn't really tell Ethan Crone all that much. He says that he's never seen him, but a pal of his had. He said he skinned a man alive and fed him to his dogs. He's got like a stare that holds you on the spot. And then like goes into like a voodoo thing. He mentions like that it's like some kind of voodoo, and he tries to scare Ethan. And so it's like, all right, I think he's just kind of fucking with this guy.
Yeah.
You know, like this
Eh,
guy's Jaka is kind of fucking with Ethan to be like, what are you asking about? Like, I'll tell
for a
you
white
the thing you
person in
kind of want to hear.
2025, it's hard for me to really figure out how effective this page is. But you know what? Greg Capullo really did a good job with the character, drawing the character.
Yeah, it's fun.
The next page is Willie, Chet, and Bigfoot, who I guess are three night people, and they seem to be aware of Spawn and some of his early adventures. These
Yeah.
guys kind of seem like a Greek chorus of letter writers who want Spawn to go back to fighting Cygor and Overkill. They use some Italian slurs for Overkill, which I'll
Yep.
not repeat. It's a weird one, and then who I assume is Bigfoot, the big hairy one in the back, barfs all over them. Oh yeah, and they ask whatever happened to that freaky monkey, Cygor.
Yeah.
Whatever did happen to
Yeah,
Cygor.
this is kind of a funny issue because it is just kind of trying to check in on it's trying to check boxes of a lot of things that we've maybe not seen in a minute. So like haven't seen Overkill, haven't seen Cygor. We are getting a little bit of the interaction that some of the folks around this area have maybe had with Spawn because we don't get to see too much. We don't get to see too much of the effects of things. You know, one of the things that I was thinking with regards to Spawn and something like Hellboy is that like Hellboy stories tend to be a little bit more episodic in the sense that like yeah, you can put them
Right.
in an order and there's a history then of like Hellboy stories. and superhero comics typically don't work that way. And Spawn wants to be a superhero comic in the sense that you start at issue 1 and you move forward and it tells stories. The problem is that Spawn doesn't, like, Hellboy seems to keep building a world, whereas Spawn keeps having a world that like collapses in on itself frequently, because there was like so many characters that were introduced, and then like, well, we don't really know what to do with them, so we don't know where, and there's no, at this point there are starting to become other books, but there's not really places for those characters to live. And so then if they don't get used in the main title, they feel lost in a way.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Well, I mean, it's kind of why we talk about Brian Holguin coming in and making such a big difference, because his approach to how he writes Spawn and how he structures the story of Spawn and the interaction of the characters to create a narrative, I think is something that Todd McFarlane kind of, that was his weak spot as a writer, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had his stylistic, we can call them strengths, weaknesses, whatever, his stylistic choices. But I think the big thing that really felt like a weakness throughout, from arc to arc, was just that lack of connective tissue and that need for someone to say, okay, we're going to now bring this back. We're going to now bring this in. We're going to connect this. We're going to connect this. You talk about Claremont doing that a lot, and we talk about that a lot. Chris Claremont on his X-Men run, being able to go, okay, well, we haven't seen so-and-so in 35 issues. I left that cliffhanger. A big part of that was having, and we've said this before too, Louise Simonson and Annie Innocenti as editors
Yeah.
to be like, hey, Chris, I actually read the comic that you wrote, and I know what the script said. So let's go back and check on this again, and kind of feeding those ideas to him. And it seems like Holguin has that ability to build in that connective tissue.
But I think the other part is that the characters, when they're not being used in the main title, as a reader, you have an awareness that they live somewhere else. So when they do pop up again, like a great example is X Factor, right?
Right.
Through Claremont's run to that point, like the original X-Men have left the book. He tries for the, they are downplayed in the book in favor of newer characters. And the point being that like Cyclops will retire, that Jean is dead, that Hank's an Avenger, Iceman was a champion, Angel was a champion and a new Defender. Like these characters just go on to live in other places, and other
There's a
writers get
level of
to.
like growth and change and stuff. And yeah, well, I mean, they have the benefit of existing in a whole Marvel universe as
Right,
well, where like if Beast shows up in whatever comic that week, if he shows up in Spider-Man, we're reminded that Beast exists without him having to be in the X-Men too. And
right.
I think that you're right that right now they pointed out themselves, like, where the hell is Cygor? What the hell did happen to that character? Will we ever know? That kind of thing. And like I feel like those three characters in particular are meant to be the Greek chorus of like commenters on what actually is happening in Spawn. And following those three, we'll actually get into some interviews with characters we know, starting with
Yeah.
Bobby. And I want to say, Greg Capullo is really making a meal out of drawing Bobby in the
Mm-hmm.
last few issues, just like really translating that anguish and sorrow that he is feeling. Because, as he talks about here, yeah, he knew Spawn. He was called out, but he told him not to call him that. He kicked everybody out of the alleys, even though they used to be friends. He had another friend named Bootsy, who turned out to be an angel, saved his life, said he'd always watch over him, but he feels like no one's watching over him now. And Bobby's interview takes 2 pages. He's got 12 panels. And man, this second page of Bobby, the interview, these 6 panels are just some of my favorite like Capullo acting panels I've seen yet. Just the
Yeah.
the 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 level of like anguish that he's able to depict in his body language and his face, it's just striking.
This is one of the moments too where I think what is like the words on the page actually, since it's not being played as a joke, or the character means something to us, I like that Holguin leans into that fact a little bit more. and
Yeah.
and for the most part, Bobby is just kind of recounting what's happened to this point to him, but we know, because we've been with him for so long, that like this is really affecting for him. And I kind of like some of the work here. He says, "Let me tell you something about Spawn. I don't think anyone ever really understood. Well, to tell the truth, I think he was lonely. Sounds funny, I know, a big tough guy like that, but I think he was. I mean, I know what it's like to feel like you ain't got nothing in this world. Like, no matter what you do, your best days are long behind you. And even they were pretty crappy now that you think about it. Sometimes things get so bleak you just gotta laugh. Most people don't have this, but old Al could have quite a sense of humor when the mood struck him. He had this real deep, booming laugh. I remember once. Wait, I'm sorry. Not Al. Spawn. Spawn, not Al. He told me not to call him that no more. Never speak that name again. That's what he said. I'm sorry. I just forgot for a minute. Do you think you could maybe cut that part out? Anyways, I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I guess I'm saying sometimes this world gets so cold, and sometimes the only thing you have to keep you from going under is your friends, and then they go and leave. And I'm sorry. Can we just stop now, please? And
It's intense.
it's hard not to have your heart break for the guy.
I know, like, there's no laugh in here, there's no let up. I mean, he's just a dude who's lost everything, and when he thought he had nothing else to lose, he lost his friends too. Like, Bobby is one of my favorite characters at this point, just because he's so human and so real, and like, I don't know. We live in a world right now that's very unkind to a lot of people.
Yep.
And the worse on your luck you are, the meaner and harder it is. And it just really feels very striking and very, very emotionally resonant to see poor Bobby going through this.
Yeah. Of
And
course, that leads us to Sam and Twitch, who
they're
are
yucking it
gonna
up.
they're gonna balance that out. And
These two chuckle fucks.
we do find out that they are ex cops now. Come Monday, they'll once again be part of the thin blue line that separates civilization from anarchy. There's a little note to see Sam and Twitch #1, so that's
Yep.
cool. But
Yay, they're cops again. Two more cops in the world.
Sam kind of
Just so
plays.
we needed. I'm wearing a shirt right now, listener, that says "Guns don't kill people, cops kill people." Just if you need a reference on my opinion on cops.
Big fan.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Sam, they're kind of playing dumb a little bit, because they do, of course, know more than they are letting on to Ethan Crone, because who's this guy?
Ethan
And
Crone.
Sam makes the joke health spa instead of hell spawn. And they bring up a story about a caped marauder that they had to go investigate. And it
Yeah,
was a woman who had some fantasy, and her boyfriend would dress up as Batman, but he hit his head, and she was tied up, and she
it's
was
like a
screaming.
real what is that? Jacob's game or whatever it's called. Someone's game, not
Is it
Ender's Game.
just
It's
the
a Stephen King book.
Jacob's Ladder?
No,
No.
no, it doesn't
Jacob's Game?
matter.
Maybe. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Anyway, they basically are just laughing at Ethan Crone. They tell this story about this time that they had to investigate
Gerald's game.
Gerald's
Gerald's
game.
game.
About this time, they had to quote unquote investigate a caped crusader, and it was a guy in a Batman mask. Kind of fun, kind of silly.
Dressed up to spice
Whatever.
up his relationship.
Yeah. Hey, we've all been there.
Next up, we get Wanda and Terry. Wanda opens the door, and Ethan Crone basically says, I didn't mean to bother you, but I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions. I understand you've had some contact with someone named Spawn. Tries to get her to confirm that her dead husband's name was Al. He's clearly trying to connect these dots between Bobby's Al, Wanda's Al. But Wanda shuts the door in his face, and Terry comes out and says, "Fuck off and don't bother my wife again." And that's kind of that. He says, "I would greatly appreciate it if you got the hell off my property before I have to stick my foot up your ass." How's that for a goddamn quote? Which, yeah, all right, man, this is America. And then we meet Corgi, who's just like a little old guy. There's a sign on the cab in the back that says "The Creech 2."
Coming soon.
Yep, we learned that someone landed on his cab, fell out of the sky, and busted it up. And there's no insurance for that.
I have a feeling that Corgi is Kenny Couric, the person who's dedicated at the top. So I don't know. That's kind of fun,
Ah,
I guess. That maybe
that's
Brian
possible.
Holguin or Greg or somebody put their friend in. That's fun.
Yeah, that's very
Uh,
possible.
the next interview is one of great interest to us, George,
Yes.
because who is it other than identity unknown?
He's here and he's like asking about the mysterious urban avenger, the Hellspawn, and he's asking if he's been able to find him. Dark alleys, blood oaths, vengeance from beyond the grave, not really my cup of tea. And then he's just like, if you could find any information on Spawn's whereabouts, then perhaps I could pay you. And the guy's like, well, look, no need for me to give you my contact information. If you find anything, I'll know where to find you. And then, they wind up, it's Crone in the alley, in the burned out husk of Rat City with two videographers who basically he's trying to get them to come in and take video of all these deep desiccated areas of Rat City, and they just get spooked and run off.
Yeah,
So
because he's planning
he
to stay there the night, and he wants them to.
yeah, he
He
wants to
wants
stay
them
the night
to.
in Rat City. This is some of the most like pointed behavior from him. Like earlier he had this exchange with his like agent where he's like, you will listen to me and you will do exactly as I say. And here there's a lot more of that where he says, I'm paying you an obscene amount of money. You will scrape the excrement from the bottom of my shoe with your teeth if I ask it. And it feels like I know a guy who'd say that.
Yeah.
And he fucking sucks. So, anyway, yeah, they run off. He says, oh, and so also he says, get back here. We have a contract. This guy's obsessed with contracts. Another clue as to his identity. And they say,
And
take it up with the union. So, you know what? One good thing we could say, he hired a union crew.
true. That's great. Well, but yeah, he ends up staying the night in the alley. It kind of creeps him out. He's there till 3-4 in the morning. He looks through. He starts hearing some thumping, and he sees the remnants of a rudimentary structure, an altar, perhaps. We know that to be
The
Spawn's
Bone
throne.
Throne.
Yeah, and but he looks into some boarded up windows, and some bats come flying out,
A whole mass
and
of bats.
and we get a big splash page of him cowering and yelling, for the love of God, what are you?
We
And
kind of see Spawn's shadow cast throughout with the chains, the ragged
yeah,
cape. Love this splash page. Highlight of the issue.
pretty cool.
Absolutely. In an issue that has good, if kind of held back art, like structurally imposed art, this page really fucking rocks. The inking is some of the best we've ever seen from Danny Miki with Greg Capullo. This, if you see this page and you don't think these guys should do Batman,
Yeah, 100%.
like it's so good. And the next page is him basically like freaking
Just
out
fear,
and
fear taking over. But I love the little panel of him in the corner saying, I want to die. Like he's been so thoroughly terrified.
yeah. He's had the literal bejesus scared out of him. We see him the next morning. He's still taking notes, and he's trying to interview none other than Cagliostro. And he says, look, please, I'm begging you, just tell me the truth. That's all I want. Tell me the truth about Spawn. And Cagliostro says, the truth? Very well, I'll tell you, but I don't think you'll like it. Funny thing about life, the truth is almost never what you hoped it would be. The truth is this: there is no Spawn. There never was. Just some old fools telling stories around the bonfire, trying to pass the time. You're chasing a shadow, Mr. Crone. Nothing more. That's the real truth. Let it go, friend. There are no answers for you here. Which, love that. And I love this closing page here of Ethan Crone just kind of walking away and looking back at where Cagliostro was standing, and Cog's just gone. And he's just like, the hell with it, and drops his pad, and it bursts into green flame. And we get the final page of Spawn's eyes hidden in the shadows of the alley where he wrote, "These alleys belong to Spawn," way back about 60 issues ago, a little more.
Yeah.
And he says, "The city was built on ghosts. Maybe some of them deserve to rest in peace." And that's the end of the story for Ethan Crone, at least for now.
Yeah, and that will lead us eventually to Spawn 88. But first, Curse of the
We have a
Spawn,
Curse of the Spawn, which means I
number
get to read the credits
26.
on this one.
Hit me with those credits.
I will whap you with those credits. Image Comics and Todd McFarlane present Brothers Keeper. Story by Alan McElroy. Pencils by Dwayne Turner. Inks by Chance Wolfe, Todd McFarlane, Jonathan Glapian, and Jason Photos. Glapian, of course, would be a longtime collaborator for Capullo as well on Batman, I think. He and Miki would both work on that. Dedicated.
And has a book coming out soon, I think.
Yes.
As well.
Copy editor and lettering, Tom Orzechowski. Colors, Todd Broker, Mark Nicholas, and Drew Dog Hutchinson. Dedicated to Darren and Karen McMillan. Didn't look them up. They seem to be authors of children's books.
Okay. Cool.
So there you go. Unless that's a different Karen McMillan, which it could be. So yeah, Brothers Keeper. And that title will become relevant, as we'll get into, which is kind of the most interesting thing about this Curse of the Spawn issue.
Yeah, listeners, you'll understand why we decided to cover this pretty quickly if you're not familiar already. So, you can go.
Okay. We open on apparently a very rich woman. She's walking out of her penthouse or her office. It's kind of unclear. Getting into a limousine. She's just basically saying like, buy, sell, funny money, booba. Just like kind of saying if you don't sell by the right whatever, you'll be out of a job. Typical office lady kicking through the glass ceiling, your worst nightmare, a chick with a job. And so there's this long monologue about death, that which hangs forever in the balance. There are those who loathe and conspire, who seek to cut their own deals, who in many ways have done so with forces beyond their understanding, like a certain hellspawn we know. And, basically it's just one of those like death don't care kind of monologues. And this lady, as she's smoking a cigarette, looking at a laptop, lamenting the numbers on her stocks as she's, careening down the highway in the backseat of this limousine, her cigarette goes flying out of her mouth as the limo goes hurtling off the road onto an embankment.
This is, we're only like 3 pages in, and I was getting tired reading this in the sense that
it's
like I have gotten so used to Brian Holguin that having gone to read Alan McElroy again, and the sort of sevenness kind of returns whenever we get into McElroy's work.
And Holguin had that too, but there is a lot of quality to McElroy's narration where it feels like that portion of Seven where he reads John Doe's diary and it's like what banal puppets we are or whatever and all that shit. And a lot of it feels like that. It's very heightened, very kind of purple and like very hard boiled. And as this lady's car goes off the side of the road, we're introduced to a guy named Travis Quinn who drives a tow truck that he has used to knock her off the road, Twisted Metal style. But there's more to it than that. Travis has a terrible skin problem. Doctors have given it a name, but his parents, fanatical about their Old Testament beliefs, call him cursed. And they call him Crocodile. Now, this is straight up just Killer Croc. Like, Killer Croc's origin is that he's a guy with a skin condition that made him mean. And his name's even Killer Croc.
An Arkham, but he was also like an Arkham guard and stuff. There's more to Killer Croc.
Sure, but not to this guy. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, Killer Croc's a character. This is a guy who is just not Killer Croc. This guy is like Schmiller Schmock. You know what I mean? He's the crocodile. And he exists in a world along with many others who are just serial killers that have, kind of boring, weird nicknames. And there's just kind of this quality to it where it's like all the serial, it's almost, there's almost like this quality where like it's almost a book about serial killers that have their own nicknames and stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's
It
weirdly
feels it
fanish in that
it
way.
it feels like this book was always trying to, like, maybe see if it wasn't telling the backstory of something, like, we get the stuff about Overkill and his brother and,
Right.
like, his reanimation and whatever. If it's not doing that, it's almost like, I don't know, can we introduce something new and horrible that might become a villain for Spawn in the future? Um, Spoiler alert, listeners, I don't know what happens with the crocodile moving forward, so we'll find out together. But this does lead to the stuff in Curse of the Spawn that I really dislike,
Yeah,
which,
we'll do a quick trigger warning here. There's a lot of violence against women. It's almost like a hostile type scene here.
yeah,
They
it's
yeah.
it's this has been pretty true of Curse of the Spawn, the stuff that we've covered already, some of the stuff that we haven't covered, where it's just like women sort of exist to be tortured, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and it's a that's what makes it such a rough read, coupled with the narration feeling pretty juvenile in like a teenager's dark twisted diary way. Um, doesn't make for the best reading experience. That said, I do think that it is like when you're tasked with, hey, you have to write the Spawn book that Spawn's not allowed to be in, really,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, you got
tough.
to ramp up the horror somehow, and I get it. It's just very
And
edge lord to me, and it's feels dated.
and that's why I wanted to bring up kind of the thing about Spawn that's kind of interesting is that the characters that kind of pop in and out, they seem to not really like live anywhere, and it feels like Curse of Spawn would have been the space for you to do that with some of them, and that is the case. But
Right.
then
There's
it
also a
just
lot of issues like this.
right, exactly. So Margaret Eschens, we found out her name on the first page, but she wakes up and she's in this like junkyard
Far
on a
below in the shadows of a place called hell.
yeah, where there's like she's on like an operating table and she's got blood on her and
Yeah, there's
she
like skulls and
screams.
chains everywhere. This guy comes out and he says, "I'm here to make some repairs. Your soul is in need of work." And he's got like a branding iron and like all this stuff. And here, is this still the crocodile? I don't think so.
No,
I think
just
it's
seems
just
like a
another
different
fucking
guy.
guy. The crocodile brought him. There's a lot of that in this comic.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and say I hate this comic. I
So
hated it. I hated it.
this guy with the branding iron, it keeps chasing her. She keeps saying like, "I can't. Everything will be fine. I must be. This must be a nightmare. Wake me up. Wake me up. Wake me up."
Yeah,
The
she
more she
says I was in
yells,
an
the closer.
accident. I'm still unconscious.
Yeah, she's the closer he gets, the more she keeps yelling, "Wake me up!" And we cut to elsewhere, Fenton Sanitarium, land of the living dead.
This book is so kind to people with mental illness on so many levels. Like, okay, so
Yeah,
we leave Margaret to be tortured. It says the nightmare has only just begun, and we get to Sam and Twitch as they're checking into Fenton Sanitarium, land of the living dead,
yeah,
and they are checking in their weapons. Twitch is carrying 5 guns, and Sam says, "How'd you hide 5 guns on your skinny frame?" And he just says, "Skillfully, sir," which is the one kind of note I guess I like.
yeah.
It's kind of funny. Um, by the way, the art on this issue, fine.
It's
It
fine.
doesn't feel great. Like, I want to
It
say,
feels like there are
Dwayne,
4 inkers on it.
it feels like there are 4 inkers, and it also feels like there's not really a central character or thing for Dwayne Turner to be focusing on, like, say, Spawn, that really makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. It's kind of just shifting POVs almost from page to page without rhyme or reason.
Yeah, it's
Um,
gotta show us a lot of stuff, and, Sam and Twitch check in, and they head to the Snake Pit, land of the mind-tortured and consciously evil. The zombies, werewolves, and vampires of modern society dwell here for 2 hours a day. Again, very kind to I mean, I guess in this case, some of these people are criminals, but,
Criminally insane, but those people, look, if you are in a state-run sanitarium health facility for the criminally insane, which is a term that is outdated, but it's one that is kind of one of the only useful
yeah,
uses for insane at this point. Someone who is not able to stand accountable for their actions for whatever reason.
someone outside their membrane.
Right, exactly. Someone, yeah, someone who's Spilkus in the Genectigazoink.
Yeah.
Um, I say that as someone who is Spilkus in the Genectigazoink. Uh, I am RFK's arch enemy by the number of meds I take. But there, yeah, it calls them the zombies, werewolves, and vampires of modern society. And then, like, Sam calls them fucking assholes and says that we should just drop grenades on them. And it's like, look, these are people who are sick, and maybe things that they've done are bad. But I truly believe in an anti-carceral reality that could happen. And for that to be a case, we have to be willing to deal with the so-called vampires and werewolves of society in a way that approaches them with the same compassion we expect from others. And I know that I don't need to get into all the reasons it's weird and controversial in today's society, but at the same time, I didn't feel great as someone who has very real mental illness, who
Sure.
has been in a facility for
Yeah.
that. I didn't love this.
The thing I don't like about it, not just the depiction of it, is I think Sam is out of character here.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't like that Sam says that we should just drop a couple grenades on him, problem solved. Like that,
He can be
while
gruff, but like,
he's not so uncaring. That's the thing, and I think I'm we're going off of Blake Whitlow's reading order, so I'm not really sure where this fits in with the Exterminator arc that happens in like the late 70s, early 80s. But like Sarah Frost was somebody that, besides being controlled by Billy Kincaid, cared for people that were kind of downtrodden, and on some level, that was attractive to Sam.
yeah,
That
Sam
she was kind of
FPL,
doing good work, you know.
he tried to get Bobby help from her and stuff.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. So this just feels wrong. It feels
it feels
like
edgy,
a
like he just,
generic cop thing, you know.
yeah, exactly. And again, I'm not even saying this is Alan McElroy's belief or anything. It just seems like an edgy thing to write for a cop to say. That's
Yeah.
how it feels to me. But so anyway, they're there. They meet Dr. Carl Marsh, supervising psychiatrist facility. And this is one of the weirdest fucking things that I've ever seen. Okay. He tells them that he needs them to go help, investigate, and help a former patient of his who's been discharged from the hospital, named, what does he say? Roger
Roger
Bonner.
Bonner.
Roger Bonner, who is about to be accused of being a killer who has been known as the crocodile killer, who I guess we just met, the crocodile.
Yeah.
We know that's not Roger Bonner. And this guy's like, trust me, everything about him will point to him being the killer. I need you to prove in advance that he's not, because they will come for him.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a stupid plot.
It's a weird setup.
Now,
We're
look,
gonna
the idea that he might be custodial of someone's health is not weird. But if he just got out of a fucking place for the werewolves and vampires of society, he's going to be under heavy supervision, I theoretically, according to what is supposed to happen. And I know I've got a
Yeah.
case of the Sposdas here, and I know in fucking America 2025, they've dismantled probably anything like that, and they don't care. But this is just a weird, stupid plot line.
Yeah.
I gotta say, and I'm just gonna say this, I kind of bristle at stories that make mental illness the like
Crux
focal
of
point. And I
everything,
don't
yeah.
always dislike that, because sometimes it's important as an element of a story. Silence of the Lambs is a movie that takes great care to pathologize its main villain. That's kind of the point of it.
Great movie.
It is a great movie, and it's also not a movie that really has a lot to say about about communities over individuals. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of care taken in the script of that film in particular. I'm just talking about the film. I haven't read the book in long enough now. It doesn't matter. Uh, to both pathologize and individualize Buffalo Bill to the point where it's very clearly saying this is not a commentary on people. This is a character we've created.
Right.
Sometimes that gets boiled down into just like mental illness as the MacGuffin for the story, like it is here to me. And that is frustrating.
Yeah. I think that that's kind of the thing that we keep running into with Curse of the Spawn is that it is unfortunately like screenwriter 101 broad strokes, and it lacks the
Yeah.
specificity. It lacks the specificity that like makes things extremely memorable. The crocodile we're not going to remember, Roger Bonner we're not going to remember. There's one
Nope.
character that we're going to get to that we will remember, and it's
Yep.
for a very specific reason. We won't even remember how Sam and Twitch act in this arc because it feels a little bit out of left field and it feels like a
Barely
first half.
matters.
Yeah. But we get to, meanwhile, in the woods north of New York City, an FBI CSU pours over the missing limo, and they pop open the trunk. And the trunk, this is another thing. It's just like gruesome. Like the art itself is not gruesome, but the description is like,
The art kind of sucks on this page.
yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
A body is in the trunk. It's head on backwards, limbs arranged to maximize horror and obscenity. Okay.
And it's a
Um,
photographer vomiting in between taking pictures, but it's just
yeah.
weirdly framed. The close up images are kind of hard to read and not interesting. Not saying I want to see the blood and guts of the body, but you kind of could have fucking drawn that at this point. Like, if you're going to go there, at least draw something more interesting than what I'm seeing on this page. And again, I don't love the violence against women that gets poured into some of these arcs. Curse of the Spawn in particular, and I don't love the like titillation that comes
Yeah.
from that. I don't like that. But if you're going to do a horror comic and you want to have that in there, they could do better than this fucking, the photographer, just taking pictures. And they call someone down from DC. They need the best profiler there is. And he's walking around in the morgue in Washington, D.C. He is pointing a gun all around, and he says, "Let's talk this out." And as we meet him, we learn that this is none other than Mark Simmons, Dr. Mark Simmons, and he is in the
That sounds
zone.
familiar. Who could he be
Simmons, why
related
that's
to?
strange. He is dealing with another serial killer, this one called the Unknown Soldier, who is dressed like a soldier. And it just is, that's the level of writing here. That's what frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like, here's another serial killer supervillain. And it's like,
Yeah.
Punisher can kind of get away with that, I guess. But like, this is stupid.
Also, I mean, you brought up Killer Croc. This is just another DC character.
Yeah, it is, literally. The Unknown
Like
Soldier.
Unknown Soldier is a character in DC
Yeah.
Comics. So
But this guy's just a guy with PTSD stuffing grenades in people's mouths, and Simmons is telling him, like, the war is over. I'm disarming. You won, because the guy thinks he's at war. There's no more enemies left. He tries to pull the pin out of the grenade that he stuffs in someone's mouth, and he gets blown away as the FBI sharpshooters do their job. Not a very
great.
good picture. The art here, I don't love it. Again, it's just kind of drab. Even this splash page is fine. The best, you know what? The thing I like best about all of this is the way that Dr. Mark Simmons is
Oh,
drawn.
he's
He
rendered
kind of
pretty
looks
well.
like Mahershala Ali a little bit, which not
Oh
intentional, I'm
yeah.
sure, because it's before his career. But I really like him. I think he's the best and most interesting part of this book, which is good because he's also the only character that matters at all. Um, he saves the guy from the grenade. He winds up taking out the unknown soldier himself with a final kill shot. And you know, we learn as he's standing over the bodies that he, quote, should be happy, job well done, hostage alive, killer finished. I like that he's not happy that someone died,
Yeah.
because ideally you don't want that outcome, no matter what the person has done. Look, okay, I don't know if I'm sure I've talked about this before at some point, but like, I did study criminal justice. That's what radicalized me against police. I have an idealized understanding of what police should be. And in some level, the ideal should be that if there's someone who's done wrong that needs to be worked with, that you need to figure out how they're going to fit into your society still doing
Mm-hmm.
what they've done. You don't want an outcome where they're dead,
Yeah.
you know? And that's it. But he's standing over this corpse, this, like, all these corpses of all the guys the unknown soldier is killed, and he
And
gets a
he
call.
gets a call on the smallest cell phone.
It's like that Will Ferrell sketch where he pulls out the tiny, tiny cell phone. And the guy says, "Sir,
Uh,
it's the director. They
yeah.
need you
And
in New York right away."
yeah, so he hops on a plane and it says Mark Simmons, the FBI's top profiler negotiator, goes over the case of the crocodile killer. A portrait of the murderer is already taking shape in his mind. And suddenly, a woman who has like gunshot wounds or blood all over her face is kind of
Still
berating
has
him.
very prominent, luscious breasts.
Uh,
There's no other way to describe that. She looks like a corpse with huge tits,
yeah,
which, I
yeah. I
mean,
mean,
goals. A lot of us are looking, trying for that. But it's almost like, okay, this scene is almost like if American Werewolf in London, if the corpse was horny.
yeah.
It's
So
very strange.
the ghost lady is berating him for screwing up in the past, and you know that she's dead and maybe poor Al will be alive if you'd been a better brother. He yells
All
at
this stuff.
nobody and
Oh yeah, so
people
by
on
the
the.
way, casual reveal. This is as you probably expected.
I mean, we get a mention of Big Brother Al
The
earlier when he does
brother
like
of Al.
the
Yes.
dive and roll earlier. So
Yeah,
it's
just
his
to
name's Simmons,
clarify, his
but yeah,
name is Mark Simmons,
yeah,
younger brother of Al Simmons. We kind of skimmed the mentions a little bit, but yes, that's what's revealed here. And while he is on his way to New York to help investigate the crocodile murderer, Sam and Twitch are helping try to find Roger Bonner as they promised. They go to his apartment, and it is just covered in the corpses of dead animals all over the walls.
yep,
He is like living in filth. And again, not a kind portrayal of mental illness, especially not of someone who is ideally rehabilitated enough to leave the state-run facility, live
yeah.
on his own. He's
It's a bad
immediately
look.
hammering cats to the wall. It's just, again, it's just that like thing where like mental illness is a supernatural curse that
Yeah,
will turn you into a weird supervillain. It's just like, it just gets old. It gets old. It gets old. And part of the reason I'm hammering it home in this comic is it has very little else to offer.
yeah. As Sam and Twitch are attempting to take him into protective custody, there's a crash and the FBI comes in, and it's he's got a tiny little ID card, which is
Yeah,
really
he
funny.
does.
Mark Simmons, forensic psychologist. Twitch, clocks the name Simmons,
Yeah, because
and
Twitch is smart.
then it says across the street, a familiar tow truck pulls away from the scene of the FBI activity. Inside the 4x4 are the McGregors, Hallie, Ben, and Jeffrey. Travis Quinn is going to have himself a busy night, to be concluded. And we
Yeah, so,
see the tow truck, and we're done. We're out. We're finished.
yep, there's
And
kids in the tow
this,
truck. There's a family. It's, yeah, oh no.
my kind of final thoughts on this issue, and then I'll talk about my final thoughts on Spawn 87, are
Sure.
basically like this issue wants to do so many things that we've kind of seen in Spawn before. That the crocodile is not this doesn't it doesn't feel unlike the Billy Kincaid issue, the first one, issue 5, where we get to like see some of the horrible things and like we're like, oh, this guy's bad. It does try to add this layer of like mystery on top of it, that I just don't think works at all. And
Right.
the script in its simplicity and broad strokes, I think just ends up kind of being offensive.
Yeah, it's
because it
just bad.
almost is like offending your own intelligence. Like the narration does so much to like be like Mark Simmons. Like, I don't know. They could have given us a little bit less. The art does not help it at all. We like Dwayne Turner on this podcast typically, but I think that
This is not his
something's
best work.
something's going on. I mean, having four inkers is always going to lead to kind of a uh, interesting kind of array of visuals. Um, and but this was, I mean, I don't think the script really gives him all that much to do because it is a lot of just chain moving, kind of plot moving stuff. And it's not particularly interesting. There's no, like you said, there's no central character until we get to Mark, like much later on. And so there's no anchors for any of these pages. The layouts kind of feel all over the place. The plotting kind of feels all over the place. The narration takes up a lot of space. So, you know, he's kind of he's kind of working from behind already.
Yeah.
But what'd you think?
I just didn't like it. I just think it sucks. I mean, look, I'm sorry.
No, it's
There's
fine.
not much value in this comic, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry to say that. I hate when I have that feeling about a comic because I just think there's something to like in almost everything, even the shittiest stuff, even stuff made by people I hate. And I don't hate Alan McElroy or Dwayne Turner or anyone who worked in this comic.
No.
I actually like some of the things they've done. I like some of the things Alan McElroy's done. I like Dwayne Turner quite a bit in some contexts. I think this issue, like you said, just suffers, and it's just not great. I mean, obviously, we're reading it because it's introducing Mark Simmons. We're gonna get into the next pieces of it next issue or next episode for us. We'll pick it back up, but yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Not a comic I would read or recommend reading if it
Yeah.
wasn't part of my part of my duties as your loyal spawnographer here. And yeah, so on the topic of Spawn, was it 88 that we just did?
87.
87, thank you. Spawn 87, my number brain. Spawn 87, it was fine. I thought it was interesting, the conceit of the documentary. I thought they approached that in a way that made it feel different from just a typical monthly comic. I actually appreciated it in a way I think I wouldn't have appreciated it if I read it at the time because I wasn't as smart as I am
Mm.
now. And I just wouldn't have gotten that they were purposefully like experimenting with trying to show the documentary
Yeah,
format.
yeah.
So I thought it was fine. I thought it was an okay issue. I don't care if we ever see Ethan Crone again. Not an interesting character to me. And that's sad because I think that the concept of a guy who is like a crime writer trying to investigate the cryptid ish side of Spawn is kind of cool, but I didn't like that version of it. I thought he was just a kind of a one note, obvious parody of a piece of shit dude. So,
Yeah. With issue 87, I think the thing that's really interesting is that it is, if you're a reader, a regular reader, right? You're reading these monthly. To get this issue would be a little bit disappointing, but it does kind of rev you up for like, I want Spawn back, right? Like you want like issue 88 as soon as possible to like get back on track. And so, as kind of a device to sort of close the door on Ethan Crone as a character, if that's the case, and to sort of restate things about the Spawn universe, which is a thing that we love to do in this book, which is to just sort of recap and sort of reset. And again, we're 13 issues out from 100, which we know will be a big moment. It's kind of a restating of the central themes a little bit and some of the stuff that's happened to sort of give us a bit of a foundation moving forward. So I think 87 is fine. I think there's some really great cartooning from Capullo,
absolutely.
some great splash pages. It is interesting to read two issues back to back by very different writers who I think sometimes are a little bit similar, but are almost like the good
Approaching
version.
similar ideas from very different angles.
Right, so it's almost like the effective way to approach something like this, and then the an ineffective way to approach something like this. It really goes to show the kinds of like tones and darkness that work for Spawn versus the kinds of tones and darkness that don't hit. Now that might be. I'm sure there are people out there that are huge Curse of the Spawn fans that absolutely love Curse of the Spawn. dear listener, your two humble spawnographers are not. Maybe not the audience for this
No,
book,
especially
but
not in comparison to the main Spawn book at this
correct,
era that we're reading.
correct.
Yeah.
I will get into some back matter here.
Yeah, I got
And
there's a couple bits of back matter in Curse of the Spawn, so get into
in
yours first.
in Spawn 87, they have the Korn music video,
Oh, that's
and
corn, right?
uh, no.
Triple that, quadruple
That's
that. I know that was a joke, and it just nothing
well,
didn't
listen, that
work.
joke had me
Didn't
disturbed,
work.
okay?
Okay, good, good.
Um, so we get some like screenshots of the Korn video here, which is cool for Freak on a Leash, and
Freak on a leash.
it got nominated for like 9 MTV awards, so that's cool. And then in the letters are uh, they're both a little bit similar. They're kind of similar to some past letters that we've covered. Um, uh, Todd answers a lot of questions for folks that are confused. Um, One person asks like the longevity of Spawn, like how much longer. Like they're like, I'm a fan of your comic, but I do not have the time or money to buy all the comics. So you may have answered a few of my questions already. If you have, please understand I have not seen the answers, which is just very, very funny. But they ask about like how long Todd wants to do Spawn and like what they should expect and whatever. And Todd says, regarding longevity, I guess it depends on which title you're talking about, but the answer is forever, if possible. I'd like to see Spawn the comic book go past 600 issues. I'd like to see the animated series in its 20th season. I'd like to keep coming up with better, weirder, and cooler toys as the years go by and create a franchise with the actual filming of it. That's in a perfect world. Do I believe that will come to pass? Probably not. I'll deal with each one of those ventures as they come, and if the world becomes bored with Spawn, I'll create something else. I might as well shoot for the moon and see what happens, which that's pretty much what he does.
Yep.
Um, there's another letter that says, I'm 16 years old and I'm a huge Spawn fan. This is the second time I've written to you, and it won't be the last. First off, let me say that when you guys leave us with a cliffhanger, you leave us with a cliffhanger. The end of issue 84 was a complete shock, and I not only want to get 85, but now I need to get it or I'll go insane. I have a few questions for you. One is just about Cog, why he has a normal face. And then the other, and like Todd
Well,
is
we
like,
know why now.
what do you mean?
We know why Cog has a normal face.
Well, because he like figured out how to
Yeah,
do
he
it. Yeah.
despawned himself.
Yeah. But then he goes, along with collecting the comic, I also collect the toys, but I'm not one of those people who buys the toys and then never takes them out of the packages. I play with those suckers.
Hell yeah, me
I
too.
don't have that many, but I do have two of the special editions, the one in plexiglass cases. I have special edition Burnt Spawn 3 and special edition Manga Spawn. I was
Cool.
wondering, what were the other two? I also collect the movie Maniacs. The only ones I need are the ones that are impossible to find unless I'm broke. Leatherface and Jason. When the second movie Maniacs line is released, I plan on going out and buying all of them. Thanks for reading. Thanks with an X for reading this, guys, and keep the comic going for years to come. Um, so Todd says, why Cog has a normal face compared with the other spawns is a good question. We have a couple of secrets up our sleeve, but the fact is he's not the only one, and that in his warp theology, there have been many spawns, and so whatever. And he says, thanks for supporting our endeavors. I'm glad you enjoy our toys. We do lots of specials. And KB Toys will be getting. Oh, KB Toys comes with a cape with new pieces added. And we have a couple of others coming out. So check the different stores to see whether they stock the item. If not, we can give you an extensive listing of them next time you write. Thanks.
Great.
So Todd, ever the salesman, just basically says, go to every single toy store because we do things with all of them.
That's what we still do.
Yep.
So there's a few pieces of curse words here that are kind of funny. The first letter is a guy responding. He says, Dear Mr. McFarlane, he has a bunch of like responses to someone else. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's all just like, they don't have any right to complain. They don't have to buy things they don't like. Basically just saying what Todd McFarlane would say. And Todd talks about the empire he runs and stuff like that and thanks him for his kind words. The one thing I'll notice that in Todd's response to that letter, he says there's going to be some changes coming to Curse of the Spawn in the next few months, which it will be canceled is what will be happening to Curse of the Spawn in
Yeah.
the next few
Yeah.
months. There's only like 2 or 3 issues after this one. So next up, we have my favorite type of Spawn letter. Dear Curse Words, I am a 13-year-old with a couple of compliments and complaints. Oh, the other thing I want to say about that previous letter, he says that the suture story takes place in the real world, and people need to be reminded of that. And it's like, man, you live in a fucked up reality. Anyway, we have a 13-year-old here with some complaints. First off, I would like to thank Mr. McElroy for creating Curse of the Spawn. Great work. The movie Spawn, which I saw twice on opening day, was a good film. It came in second place for the weekend, while Air Force One took first. This is an astute 13-year-old.
Who cares about the box office?
On video, my father bought me the R-rated Spawn for my birthday last May. I have both the PG-13 and the R version. I watched them both and noticed there isn't much difference between them. The movie only took in about $60 million total. That isn't really a lot compared to other big movies. Take Scream, for example. It brought in over $100 million at the box office, and the sequel did even better. It was also R-rated. I like that film a lot. It was a big hit because of what the teens want to see in a film. Gore. Pure chaos and gore that for some reason was left out of Spawn. You guys wanted a PG-13 rating, but it didn't really help now, did it? Take a look at all the smash hits at the box office now. Scream, Scream 2, and I Know What You Did Last Summer will make it at the box office. All the teens, including myself, want pure gore. This movie's not that gory. In regards to the letter in Curse 13 about Batman being a hit, Batman is a kid's movie and a kid's comic book. Spawn is a bloodbath for mature teens and up. That is why Batman is a major hit. I used to collect Spawn comics, but I did not really like it that much. Then I read number 5 of Curse, and it took my breath away. The pure capital C chaos in that comic, the anger and pure gore made me want to read it again and again. My favorite so far is the Sam and Twitch miniseries. I thank Mr. McElroy for that, and yes, I do know he wrote the movie and look at the cartoon show. I love it. It was just great. Also, I need to thank Mr. McElroy for that. But why the sexual content? Is that needed, especially in a cartoon? That's a rather graphic scene when Chapel's with the prostitute. If you do make a sequel to Spawn in the future, let it be the way it's supposed to be. A pure bloodbath. If you're going to make a Curse of the Spawn film, let it be like the comic book. It would be great if it was about Sam and Twitch miniseries and mix it with other plots. That's just my suggestion. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I'm just giving my opinion. I'm looking forward to replying Curse in a Curse issue in the near future. Once again, thank you for creating Curse. It's a truly great comic. I get every issue I can. One more thing, when's the second season of Spawn going to be available on video? Sincerely, George Marston. Sincerely, William S., Costa Mesa, California.
Wow.
I will say when I was 13, I was like not like I wasn't like, give me the bloodbath gore. I was kind of more in the like, where's the gratuitous sex?
Well, listen,
You know,
different strokes.
that's absolutely the funniest phrase to use right there. So we get a response where it says, you're right. If you stack it up against Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster and Harrison Ford and some other bigger movies, then it falls short. But if you look at it comparative to the number of movies that were put out in the year of 1997, if you look at that, you'll see that we fared pretty well and actually outgrossed a lot of movies that had major stars and bigger budgets than us. It goes on and on and on and on and on. Spawn sequel, Spawn 3. As for your point about youth and all they care about is blood and gore, I find that hard to believe. I think what the younger audiences like and what they get out of Scream is the adrenaline rush and the action, not necessarily that someone gets a machete through the eyeball. I don't think you need to show violence for the sake of violence, but it has a purpose and a place. I think you need to put it in. just say, hey, I'm going to do a gore book because I'm appealing to a group of people between ages of 13 and 18, I think you're being far too simplistic. And it just goes on from there saying that, I hope that what makes Spawn interesting to people is the characters.
Okay.
Then we got a funny letter here. That one is also from George Marston. We got a funny letter here that's from, it says, Dear Wizard. Okay.
Dear Wizard.
Yep. I am guessing that judging by the contents of this is a letter that was sent to Wizard and forwarded to Todd McFarlane. You'll see why. Dear Wizard, in response to Todd McFarlane's letter of magic words in issue 77, there are many reasons why people begin and continue reading certain comics. Familiar artists, great artwork, plots thicker than tracing paper, a little reality, and mostly exposure through friends. Never would have started reading Spawn if it wasn't for my friend. I kept buying them for the killer artwork and the great stories. I like the way that the Spawn comic does all kinds of things that no one expects, like when Simmons got his face back for a day or however long. But it always manages to bring up issues, not only of the supernatural kind, but societies, like drug problems, violence, gangs, domestic violence, and racism. By the by, where I live, the only local place to buy comics was a drugstore, but that has been bought out and they no longer keep comics in stock. This truly sucks. Is there a way to order back issues of Spawn without it having to shell out $10 for a comic? And also, can I get a subscription? I wrote to the address on the inside cover of an issue of Spawn asking the same thing, but never received a response. Yep. So anyway, that's kind of a boring response. It just says, it's unfortunate you don't have easy access to a store to satisfy your comic buying habits, but there are a couple ways to remedy that. One is to check the internet, and two is to go out to the newsstand and buy a Wizard magazine and check the ads in the back. They're from people who supply comic books. 3 is to phone the toll-free number for the comic shop directory that's usually listed in the back of most comic books or toys. They can tell you where your closest shop is, and so on and so forth. And that's really it,
There's
You
one
know.
really funny quote that I didn't read from Todd that says, "The script for the Spawn movie sequel has just been handed in, and Spawn will undergo another transformation in terms of visuals to update him into what he'll look like when the movie comes out next year."
And as we all know, Spawn 2 fucking whipped.
Yeah, it was the
The
biggest movie of the
visuals,
year 2000.
it was the biggest movie of the year 2000. That's right.
All right. Well, listen, that's been 2 issues that are tangential. Well, one's tangentially related to Spawn, and one it was also kind of tangentially related to Spawn.
That's 2 comics we read and talked about, and yeah, this is our shortest episode in a while, I think, and that's fine. Uh,
Yeah.
especially considering what we covered. Next episode, we'll get into more of
2
that
more
curse of the
curse.
Spawn.
Yeah.
So
See how that goes.
hopefully we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. We'll learn more about Mark Summers or Mark Summers, Mark Simmons.
Before we go, George, do you have any recommendations for our dear listeners?
I do. I do have a recommendation. I think that you should find someone who needs help that is in your power to give and help them on any level, whatever it is. If they need food and you can buy it for them, do it. If they have medical bills and you can give them for their GoFundMe, chip in. Just find someone. If you can shovel your neighbor's walk and they need it, do that. Just literally any way you can find one person to help and just do something nice that they need. Just do it. That's
Hell
it.
yeah.
We
That's
live in a
really
fucked
nice.
up world, and I'm seeing it reflected around me in a lot of ways right now, and that's one of the only things we have the power to do. Is just really do one nice thing today.
Cool. I am going to recommend Charles Burns' Final Cut.
Yes.
I think Charles Burns put out 3 books in 2024. Final Cut was one of them, about kids making movies on their own, making little horror movies. And of course, because Charles Burns, a little weird. And if that's your thing, if you liked Black Hole, that's another recommendation. I guess I'd just recommend Charles Burns in general if you're looking for some creepy crawlies, some horror-y stuff. We're recording this at the beginning of March, and it's still winter, so I was in the mood, and I saw it at the store. And those books they're really beautiful. They look great on a shelf as well. So
Yesterday it was summer here. It was 75 degrees. Today it was 43.
incredible. It was 60 yesterday here, which was amazing. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it. If you
Yep.
like the show, please rate, review, subscribe. We're on all your favorite podcatching apps: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Share with your friends. Let us know if you have any suggestions for us, or you want to just tell us what the box office draw of Spawn was in 1997, as if we don't already know. You can write us at spawnographypod@gmail.com. You can find us on the internet at spawnography or at spawnographypod in general. And yeah, that's pretty much it. George, for Todd so loved the world.
He gave his only begotten spawn.
See you later, Hellspawn.